Welcome to Shalom World Podcast.
Welcome back to another episode of Heroic Lives, where we explore the extraordinary stories of saints whose wisdom, courage, and faith continue to shape our world.
Heroic Lives.
In our last episode, we met St. John Chrysostom, the golden-mouthed preacher who confronted emperors and comforted the forgotten. If you missed it, I'd really encourage you to go back and listen to that full episode on shalomworld.org/podcast.
Chrysostom, powerful, bold, unforgettable. So, where are we headed today?
We meet a different kind of doctor of the church, one whose greatness didn't lie in stirring speeches or dramatic confrontations, but in the quiet depth of contemplation. A man who drew the map for the soul's journey to God, who taught with a life rooted in prayer, humility, and love.
And who is this man?
Saint Bonaventure. You may already know this, but some of the doctors of the church were philosophers, some were mystics, some priests. All of them, lovers of truth. And Bonaventure, he was all three. Let's start at the beginning. Born around 1217 in a small Italian town called Bagnoregio, he came into the world as Giovanni di Fidanza. His family was deeply Christian, but his early years were marked by crisis. At age 4, he fell seriously ill, so ill that his mother feared for his life. With no other hope, she turned to prayer. She pleaded with St. Francis of Assisi, who had died only a few years earlier, asking for her son's healing. The child recovered, and that healing became a turning point. Giovanni would grow up not only grateful to St. Francis, but devoted to him. Eventually, he joined the Franciscan order and took the name Bonaventure, meaning good fortune. Some say St. Francis himself prophetically gave him that name. Whether that story is legend or not, the life that followed was nothing short of extraordinary. Bonaventure studied at the University of Paris under some of the greatest minds of the time. He was trained in philosophy, logic, and theology, but unlike many scholars, he didn't lose himself in theory. His faith wasn't just intellectual, it was intimate. And that balance of brilliance and humility didn't go unnoticed. At just 36 years old, he was elected Minister General of the Franciscan Order. Imagine being put in charge of a massive, growing religious movement that was already beginning to struggle with division. His leadership was about returning to the heart of Franciscan life: poverty, simplicity, fraternity, and love. Later, he was appointed Cardinal Bishop of Albano and played a key role at the Second Council of Lyon, a council that sought unity between the Eastern and Western churches. Bonaventure helped draft documents, facilitated dialogue, and bridged theological gaps with clarity and grace. And still, through it all, he remained a Franciscan, grounded, prayerful, centered on Christ. Now let's talk theology. At the center of Bonaventure's teaching is this: the soul is made to journey toward God, not by climbing a ladder of knowledge alone, but by passing through creation, moving inward in self-reflection, and finally, through Christ crucified, ascending to union with God in love. He called it an ascent, a movement, a pilgrimage, and he laid it out in his masterpiece, The Journey of the Mind to God, a mystical guidebook that's still read today. In this passing over, he writes, if it is to be perfect, all intellectual operations must be abandoned, and the entire height of our affection must be transferred and transformed into God. It's not about abandoning reason, but about knowing when to let love lead. Bonaventure emphasized 3 stages in the spiritual life: purgation, illumination, and union. Or, in simpler terms, cleansing the heart, receiving light, and resting in God. This is the daily work of prayer, of asking, where is God in this moment? How is he calling me deeper? What must I let go of to love him more? And Christ? Always at the center. For Bonaventure, Christ was the beginning, the middle, and the goal of everything. He called Christ the mirror of the Father, the one through whom all grace flows, the one in whom the soul finds its true home. Let's pause for a moment on the sacraments. Bonaventure had a deep, almost awestruck reverence for the Eucharist. He called it the sacrament of union.
Why?
Because in the Eucharist, Christ gives himself fully, body, blood, soul, and divinity, not as a symbol, but as a real presence that nourishes, transforms, and draws us into communion with God. In this sacrament, he wrote, Christ is present in his own substance, for what is offered is truly the body born of the Virgin, which hung on the cross and rose from the tomb. To Bonaventure, the Mass was heaven touching earth, not a routine, a revelation. His influence reached far beyond the church walls. He helped shape medieval education by insisting that learning must serve love, that intellectual formation was incomplete without prayer, that theology wasn't meant to impress, but to transform. He resisted the rising tide of pure rationalism, the idea that we can reason our way to salvation. Bonaventure didn't reject reason, he just knew it had limits. For him, faith must always be illuminated by divine love. He also warned against spiritual pride. He had no patience for elitism in religion. For him, the holiest people weren't necessarily the most educated, but the most humble, obedient, and loving. And when he spoke of reform, he didn't mean slogans or strategies. He meant saints. He believed that real reform begins in the heart, in a return to the simplicity, poverty, and holiness of Christ. He lived what he taught, and he bore the cost of it. Bonaventure faced tension at the University of Paris. Not everyone liked the idea of friars holding academic positions. Some saw him as a threat, but he stayed rooted, navigating conflict with patience and clarity. At the Council of Lyon, where he worked tirelessly for church unity, he fell ill. He died there in 1274, quietly, faithfully, in the service of the church he loved. He was canonized in 1482 by Pope Sixtus IV, and in 1588, Pope Sixtus V declared him a doctor of the church. Let me leave you with one quote. In everything, whether it is a thing sensed or a thing known, God himself is hidden within. That's the key to Bonaventure's soul. He didn't divide the world into sacred and secular. For him, everything was drenched in divine meaning. Every person, every moment, every corner of creation was a signpost pointing to God. For many your house, many your aims.
So what about us?
In a world that rewards noise and speed, Bonaventure invites us to be still. In an age obsessed with data and information, he reminds us that wisdom begins in prayer. In a culture that chases success, he offers us something better: Christ at the center, love as the method, and union with God as the goal. You don't have to be a mystic or a scholar to walk his path. You just need a willing heart, a little courage, and a lot of grace. Thank you for joining us for this episode of Heroic Lives. If St. Bonaventure's story stirred something in you, if it made you pause, even for a moment, share it. Let his vision shape your vision. There are more stories to follow, more heroic lives to inspire and guide us. Until next time, keep Christ at the center. Let love lead, and never stop seeking the God who hides in plain sight. St. Bonaventure, pray for us.
Shalom World Podcasts is now available on all online platforms, including Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and others.